I want to start by saying I think we put a lot of emphasis on the pre and the during training. The recovery is just as important. We also need to understand that the body's still in a state of improved insulin sensitivity. So we want to make sure that whilst you may have had a pre and a during training nutrition or fuel or carbohydrate source, doesn't mean you've necessarily matched the amount of carbohydrates that you've used. And then also consider your requirements for the rest of the day. So everyone's different. Even if you're, on a weekend and you're not going to be doing a whole lot of activity, we still need to have those muscles refueled, so getting the carbohydrates back into the muscles. Even if you fueled before and during, we know that that's pretty well going to be depleted or close to depleted by the end of a training session, particularly, your long weekend sessions or particularly a high intensity training session. So if we just completely skip our post-training meal, we're not setting ourselves up for great recovery, and particularly for that next training session, as you mentioned. And then we're typically setting ourselves up to be much hungrier later in the day because we haven't fueled or refueled and recovered properly. So often people go straight to protein, say, I need to have my protein post protein shake. I need to have my protein. Yeah. Yes, protein's great. We know that supports the muscle repair process, but we need to consider that the muscle refueling process is just as important because it sets us up for the next training session, but then sets us up for the rest of the day, whether that's, work, study, hanging out with the family, playing with the kids, whatever it might be. We're still using carbohydrates in everyday sort of life as well. Nowhere near at the rate of a high intensity training session, but we want to make sure that there's enough carbohydrate in that post-training meal to refuel muscle stores, and then make sure that we're able to go ahead and do the rest of our day. And a really key thing that I see, or common thing that I see, is after a long and high intensity weekend ride, typically if you're not refueling post, you're going to have that 2 p.m. nap. And so a lot of feedback I get is, hey, now that I'm having a proper post-ride meal, I don't have to go and have a nap for the rest of the afternoon. And it's typically because we've got more energy in the body and the body is not absolutely exhausted post-training. So there's so many benefits to it, but we do want a combination of carbohydrates and protein. And then I always advocate for also adding in some anti-inflammatory fats in there. So that's going to speed up the muscle recovery process as well, and also reduce that muscle soreness side of things. So that could be, in the form of avocado. It could be salmon, it could be adding olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, it could be nuts and seeds, it could be hummus, or a whole bunch of other good quality fats that we can add to that meal that has some carbohydrate, that has some protein, and then bonus points if we get in some sort of what I call the color portion, so the fiber we're from some salad or some vegetables. Could be fruit, but that's also contributing to the carbohydrates part of that plate as well. So if we think about it, it's a complete recovery plate: protein, carbohydrates, some healthy fats, and ideally some color on there as well.
Is there any, I'm assuming this would probably depend on the type of session I've had and their body weight and all that, but as a general rule, is there should we be aiming for a certain amount of carbs, a certain amount of protein? And can you give us an example of what a plate would look like that you recommend to your client?
So as a general guide, 30 grams of protein and 50 grams of carbohydrate is a good place to start. Okay. And again, we're probably going to scale up from there on the carbohydrate side of things, even the protein side of things, dependent on time of day and how long and hard that session was. But let's just use the 50 grams of carbohydrates and 30 grams of protein. We know that that's going to help recovery. That could look like 3 eggs on, say, 2 or 3 bits of toast. We're going to have that spread of avocado to get the healthy fats, and then we might have a milky coffee on the side of that. And ideally, that toast is going to be a grain bread. So again, extra portion of healthy fats there, and then that milky coffee on the side of that, and then potentially even some baked beans on the plate as well. And so then we're going to hit the 30 grams of protein quite easily. We're going to hit that 50 grams of carbohydrate quite easily. A little bit of healthy fat, and we've also added baked beans being a vegetable. We've added that color portion, and you get your coffee on the side of that. Okay.
Any benefits of the coffee or the caffeine?
Absolutely, from many perspectives. I mean, I use caffeine often pre-ride and during ride, not often in coffee form on the bike, obviously, prior to. Post, depending on the time of day, still going to help with mental alertness and things like that. Not really going to promote recovery as such, maybe a little bit, but that's not the general consensus why we're using it. That's more just something that people people often have, post morning ride, particularly, if you're at a cafe with some mates after a ride, you're probably going to have a coffee as part of that. So we can use that as, a bit of a protein depending on the milks that you're using, and then probably a little bit of carbohydrate in that as well.
What I've found from speaking to people is this pre-meal, it sounds well and good, but the problem is I get back and I don't feel like it. So how do you get people to actually lean in and start doing it when they're hot, they have to shower? There's a lot of resistance, I find.
Yeah, and I find it can go one or two ways. Either some people are starving post-ride or some people just absolutely have no appetite. Couple of different things will impact this. You mentioned heat, and that's a really important one. So in hot temperatures, we know, and particularly, if you're living in a hot environment for one, but also the harder that you push your body, core body temperature increases as well. So during that, it actually switches off that hunger hormone. So it makes it a lot harder to want to eat after a hard training session or a really hot training session. So you think a typical weekend bunch ride, you might not be finishing till 11, 12 o'clock in the day. And then you're trying to eat a recovery meal in the middle of the day when it's at its hottest. Sometimes can be really, really difficult. One, because you push yourself, you exerted yourself and core body temperature's increased. It's not natural to go ahead and eat, huge bowl of food or huge plate of food post. And if it's hot, like, you're just generally only going to want cold water at best. So to get around that it's quite, sounds contradictory, but as soon as you start eating, it is going to help promote that appetite. But we might actually just work with what we can, and we might use liquids, for example, and cold smoothie.
Yeah, okay.
So we can still get 30 grams of protein quite easily. Depending on the type of milk you're using, we may or may not add in yogurt or protein powder, for example. We're going to add the carbohydrate form, usually with some fruit, probably some rolled oats or some other form of blendable carbohydrate in there. And then we can add that healthy fat by adding some nuts or seeds through it as well.
Okay.
And then, if you want to chuck some frozen spinach in there to get some extra colour, or if we've added that fruit portion in there, you're ticking off that colour as well. So we can quite comfortably tick off those boxes, and it's going to be much easier to eat in liquid form. It doesn't take as much effort for the gut to break down, and it's cool. So we're sort of cooling body temperature at the same time, or core body temperature ever so slightly, but it just kind of helps with that perceived impact of heat and exertion post-training.
Do you find that once people start doing it, even though they may not feel like it, they end up being able to condition themselves to actually enjoy it? I've found that to be the case for me. Similar to the pre-ride meal that I never used to have because I didn't like getting up and eating. Now I find it a lot easier because maybe is it to do with gut training? I don't know.
It is to do with gut training, but it also becomes when you see the benefits of it. I think it's much easier to then buy into it, and sometimes that takes a few weeks. So again, it's pushing through, waiting till you see the benefits, or to really buy into it. But knowing that it is very beneficial for your overall recovery, and then also for what is happening for the remainder of the day from an overall energy perspective and appetite perspective as well.
Yeah, I've found that I've just been a better human in the afternoon.
Much nicer to be around, absolutely.
Yeah, more focused on work. It's really, it's an eye-opening experience when you do it.
Well, we know that, feeling well is also not linked to just the performance side of things, but, your gut health, your mood and your mental clarity. So there's lots of benefits to it. We obviously talk very specific to training performance, but we know that there's loads of benefits from an overall health and wellness point of view as well. Yeah. And just, as you said, nicer person to be around.
Yes.
If you're not super irritable and you might be underfueling without realizing it.
So if somebody's watching this and they're like, oh, this is interesting, I need to dial in my post-meal meal, we offer a service at the RCA that you run.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a RCA 12-week nutrition program with myself. Yep. So that includes the initial appointment, which from there I develop an individualized meal plan. We're going through your training requirements, all of your lifestyle and health background, and then creating a plan that's suitable for you. And then you've got a 12-week program with me, so a number of sessions over that 12 weeks that we can fine-tune things and get it right for you. And we'll link that below.